latest reimagining of one of Disney's classic animated features. And so we all know the story. A thief on the streets of Agrabah meets a princess, falls in love with her, and then after discovering a magic lamp with a genie inside, he decides to use his newfound, wish-giving being to help him disguise himself as a prince so that he can win the affections of the princess, because for some reason he thinks that's the only way to actually win over her affections. And behind the scenes, of course, we have the evil sorcerer Jafar, who wants to take over Agrabah, and he's going to do this through the magic lamp that Aladdin has. I'll give a very quick idea for you guys of what Aladdin as a movie means to me, as far as the animated movie. I love the music, I love Princess Jasmine, I like Aladdin himself a lot, and I still think that Robin Williams gave one of the single greatest performances for a non-voice actor in any animated film. I still think that to this day. So this movie does mean a fair bit to me. So I was going in hoping that this movie would at least be okay, and then the trailers just didn't help my enthusiasm, but I'll go into that as I go through my thoughts. But before we actually start the review, I want to throw out my normal disclaimer for those of the uninitiated. The way that I convey my thoughts is through a pro and con list. It helps me best catalog the good and the bad, in my opinion, with a movie. And while I try to keep the sections separate, if I can make a pro and con kind of work off each other, or maybe if they're intrinsically tied together, then I will actually start to mix and match. I will most likely do it in this review especially. Also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, or if you're not already a subscriber, because it helps out the channel a lot. Anyway, there's your disclaimer and reminder to subscribe. Let's go ahead and get into my review of the 2019 remake of Aladdin. Going in, I think we all had reservations about Will Smith as the genie. I mean, whether you had the idea that no one ever could or should replace Robin Williams as the genie, or maybe you were worried that Will Smith, as he's gotten on in age, has maybe lost a bit of that charm and charisma that, and that energy that he had when he was younger that would really work with this role. Or maybe it was just because you saw those terrible, terrible trailers with CGI Blue Genie, and like many of us just thought, this movie's gonna be fucking terrible. Well, I can tell you that it still looks terrible, but I'll get into that a little bit later. But I'm gonna focus solely on the performance itself. Will Smith is, in fact, the main highlight of the film, and maybe the most consistent one at that. He does not simply do an impression of Robin Williams, or even try to replicate what Williams did. He just tries to make the role his own, and it also doesn't hurt that the writers gave Genie a subplot in the film that's more grounded, and surprisingly works. If you look at the concept itself, maybe it doesn't sound like it would work, but it actually does in context. But like I said, he made the role his own, and he definitely brought that trademark Will Smith charisma to Aladdin. And really, your opinion on his genie, I feel like, will depend on how much you like Will Smith, how much your mileage goes on that. Williams was able to bounce back and forth between different personas, and would just, break the fourth wall occasionally. And while Smith is great, he does feel more like he's being himself than a different character, so you guys can be the judge of if it works or not. It's all your guys' opinion. In my opinion, it worked. There is one issue that I did have with the genie, and it's that he sadly becomes less of a focus in the second half, and it's because of the way that he's written. There's not enough there for Smith to grasp onto and just have fun with. They kind of turn him into a bit of a straight man, which the reasoning is understandable, but it didn't really feel natural in the way that it was written. But back to another positive, Smith also brought out my two favorite scenes in the film, which happen to be musical numbers, Arabian Nights and A Friend Like Me, which I will get into right now. Surprisingly, just like Robin Williams, Smith also sung the opening song for the original animated movie Arabian Nights, And not only does he do an amazing job at singing this song, Smith specifically, the sequence is just this long, one long tracking shot through the city of Agrabah all the way to the Cave of Wonders, easily being the best composed scene in the entire film. And again, I will mention more of the technical side later on. And the Friend Like Me sequence is definitely different from the original, despite the fact that there are some specific callbacks, and it's mostly different because of how Smith tackles the song that was made synonymous with Williams. He truly made it his own, just like he made the genie role his own, and this is probably this is the most high-energy sequence in the entire film, and is probably the only sequence other than Arabian Nights that actually came at least close to capturing the magic of the original. Now, one big thing that people wondered about with this movie was Princess Jasmine herself. From what I saw, or from what I've seen throughout my life, Jasmine in the original animated movie is at least in the top 3 best Disney princesses, and maybe even top 3 favorites. And I think that there's a reason for it. She felt the most formed out of any of the other princesses that showed up around that same time and before, and I'm talking about you specifically, Sleeping Beauty, Briar Rose, one of the most boring Disney princesses ever. She had a unique and iconic design, and also, Jasmine is a fucking pet tiger, so she's pretty awesome. I'm happy to say that Naomi Scott does a great job. She gives, without a doubt, the best performance in the entire movie. Will Smith may be the overall highlight, and the more consistent one throughout the film, but Scott shows off her range in this film, whether it's with singing or acting. And speaking of Raja, her pet tiger, Raja doesn't get as much focus in the film, and instead of putting a lot of emphasis on a CGI tiger, the filmmakers decided to, and I thought this was a good, actually, I was a little hesitant about it before, but I did end up liking it. They decided to add a brand new character named Dahlia, who is Jasmine's handmaiden, and she's played by Nazim Pedrad. I think she's from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I think she is. I won't go into too much detail about her character, but I will say that she was a definite surprise in a very positive way. The way that she would interact with others in her own awkward way would always stir laughter for myself and my wife, and at least the majority of the audience in the theater that we were watching it in. I do want to throw this out there real quick because I was going to tie this into the comments on Naomi Scott and Princess Jasmine, but these are my thoughts on the costuming, because Jasmine definitely has some of the best costumes. I mean, I didn't particularly care for the pink one, but it's more like a nitpick for me. It's not big enough to be a con, and anyway, that's just my opinion. You guys some of you guys probably love it, and that's fine. This is definitely one of the best costume designs of the entire year so far for a film. May even end up being still in the top 5 at the end of this year. I don't know. We shall see. But everything just feels culturally accurate and filled with a sort of vibrancy, especially in the color. But there's one big major flaw with the costuming, and it happens so consistently that it became more of a nitpick. It's something that I actually need to talk about, and it's this. Imagine what Agrabah is, you know, just whether it's in the animated movie or the one that I'm talking about right now. Just picture it in your head. You got the image? Okay. I'm thinking that maybe the first thing you're thinking about is how it's a city in the middle of the desert. What should people worry about in the desert? Sandstorms, and just the fact that there's sand everywhere. You know, it's rough, coarse, gets everywhere. I'm not gonna go into Star Wars quotes. Many times in the film, the clothes would be absolutely perfect, not a scratch, tear, or stain. It definitely took away from the immersion when you would see Aladdin in his lower class garbs, and it still looks like, you know, something fancy, like he's never actually done any work in them, even at that point. And, you know, there would be points where he'd be rolling around in the snow and jumping from building to building, and then he'd get like a bit of dirt and dust in one shot, but then immediately from another camera angle, he looks completely clean, and it made no sense. They would just be pristine to the point where it felt more like you were watching a live-action Aladdin stunt show at Disney World. I must throw this out before I get more submerged into the con section because this is going to be fun. And it involves the Prince Ali sequence. Most likely you saw the clip that was released like a week or two ago. The one that everybody said had low energy and was frankly kind of boring. I can honestly say that while I agreed with the consensus when I saw the clip, the song is much better in context, especially because they don't show how it starts, and I thought that the way that it starts is kind of, you know, it's nothing special, but it still, you know, brought you to the point where you were able to enjoy that part that was in the clip that was shown. But sadly, it's only the first half that's pretty good. The second half or so becomes a bit lesser in quality, and it just starts dragging on for a little too long. Now that we get into the con section, you've probably noticed that I haven't even talked about the main character, played by Meadows. Yeah, okay, so let's be clear. I don't think that Masood is a bad actor. I don't think he showcased him as a bad actor. The only thing I'd seen him in before this was in a small role in the Jack Ryan series. And other than that, I didn't notice him. He came and went. I didn't get enough to see if he was a bad actor or a good actor in those. And in this movie, he's not a bad actor. Quite the contrary. It's just that you can never really believe him as Aladdin, which brings down the film further without even taking into account the issues that I've mentioned before, or that I will mention in like a minute or so. And he was definitely the lesser on the concepts of acting and singing. And speaking of those two concepts, I'm going to throw this as another con, as a separate con, but it's still tied to him. I want to touch on the interactions in the film between him and Smith and him and Scott. On the acting front, for both of his co-stars, they seem to have to really work at it to give good performances while working with Masood in a scene, because Masood wasn't giving them much to play off of, and it really shows the most when Aladdin and Genie are interacting. And as far as the singing goes specifically, he's definitely got a voice, like I mentioned. He can sing, but as the film went on, I began to notice that there was nothing particularly special about his voice, and I would become a tiny bit bored when he would sing. And even in A Whole New World, which should have been an amazing scene, but it's brought down by a couple of things, including this one thing. You know, Scott sings with him, and you could see there are two separate levels as far as, like, how talented they are in singing. It's just, I don't know, like, even when they tried to blend together, their voices didn't blend. It just, I don't know, it was too jarring to me. And an even worse character in this film is the popular snake-loving sorcerer Jafar, played by Marwan Kenzari. I think that's his name. I really did not care for this iteration of Jafar. They just took him, they took away any semblance of a personality from him, tried to give him a small backstory that kind of, that's just explained away through some expositional dialogue, and, you know, overall, he just wasn't, he never felt threatening. Maybe it was his tenor voice, or maybe it was just because very little effort seemed to project from him in regards to, like, facial tics or body language even. It's just, I don't know, it was a very bland performance, very bland character. I want to touch back on the CGI issue that I mentioned earlier, you know, that we all expected after seeing the trailers. The CGI is, for the most part, bad, with a few shots, mostly Arabian Nights, or mostly from Arabian Nights. Those looked awesome. The Genie still looks terrible. Abu has way too much of an uncanny valley thing going on, same with Rajaz at times, and there are many sequences where you could just tell that there were green screens utilized. Even the whole New World sequence could have been better if green screen was not as blatant or just not as bad. And hell, there's even one scene where Aladdin's in a snowy tundra, and you could just see that it's got that green screen Star Wars prequels look about it. As with any Guy Ritchie movie, you kind of expect certain quirks, especially from the technical side. Some in the script, but I don't think he worked on the script specifically, so I'm not gonna touch on that. Although I will say that some of the dialogue's not that good, but that's just more of a nitpick on my part, really. There are definitely some issues in the technical side of this movie. The quick cut editing that he's been known for doing does not serve the film justice. It only makes the film a little bit less coherent than it should be, and there was this one specific time where it just hurt to watch the film. It occurs during the one jump ahead sequence early on in the film, and if you look really closely, you start to notice that the footage appears to be sped up as though we are speeding through it, but then they took the audio, cut it out, and replaced it. So every once in a while, not only would the shots be filled with some unusual motion blur, and I'm not saying like they're running, I'm saying like he's just walking and it's just little tiny bits of motion blur and it looks terrible. And also there would be very terrible lip sync issues because of it. And I did not notice this as much with other sequences in the film, but it was very distracting anyway from this one, to the point where I basically had to throw it in and mention it in this video. And speaking of how the editing doesn't serve the film justice at all, it seems to make the film's pace faster, but in an unnatural way. So, the original movie, I'm pretty sure, is 90 minutes on the dot, and maybe some change or something, but this remake was 2 hours and 8 minutes, so a full half hour and some change more than the original. And instead of just keeping about the same material in the movie and just simply adding stuff on top of it that could help flesh certain story beats and characters out, they seem to just speed through all character development and recycled story beats in order to make way for the newer stuff that they've added, and it's not going to make anybody happy the way they do it. Hell, even in the opening sequence when they show the Cave of Wonders, oh, by the way, the mouth doesn't move, it's just like, you hear it talk, but it doesn't move. It's not as, what is it? It doesn't have the personality that it did in the animated movie. Even that, they brought back the original voice actor for the Cave of Wonders. He still sounds great, but you could tell that they were having him speed through the dialogue, because in the original movie, it was just, know this, only one may enter here, one whose worth lies far within, the diamond in the rough. In the movie, it's, I just said the line, why did I forget it again? Damn it. Oh, know this. God damn it. I'm trying to convey it through my words. Oh, know this, only one may enter here. One whose worth lies far within, the diamond in the rough. Basically, he just speeds through it, and I don't know. It bothered me. And one small con to finish out the cons. Guy Ritchie has proved with this film that he has no idea how to helm a musical sequence. We get many boringly placed shots, and they even seem to treat some musical numbers as action sequences, which for the majority does not work. And hell, there's even a musical sequence where one character is singing solo, and they're just standing still, and the camera's just rotating around their head. And these are scenes that are only good to potentially induce nausea. And those are my individual thoughts on Aladdin. Sorry, she jumped in my lap right before. There are definitely good things about the movie, like Scott, Smith, those two musical numbers, but other than that, it's just another live-action remake that could not even attempt to live up to the first one, and maybe even didn't try to as much, it felt like. It showcases why movies should not feel overly manufactured, what with the always clean clothing and even the buildings, which you can't help but feel like are movie sets. I should have made that a con. You know what? Make that a con right now. Movie sets. The buildings look like movie sets. If you're a big Disney fan or Will Smith fan, I think I do recommend it for you. I just don't expect a big glowing endorsement from me. Just, go ahead and proceed with caution. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please don't hesitate to hit that like button. And remember, if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can keep up to date with everything that's going on in the channel. All that's left to say is farewell until the next video, all you movie fans and casual moviegoers alike, and keep on being awesome.